The moment trust turned mechanical, at first, it felt like progress. Promises no longer depended on faces or favors. Agreements survived distance, death, and delay. Trust had finally been freed from the limits of memory, and London celebrated the efficiency it unlocked. The city was expanding faster than personal relationships could sustain. Trade stretched across oceans. Credit-bound strangers who would never meet. Old assurances, handshakes, reputation, family name, no longer scaled. London needed trust that could travel without people. To understand why this mattered, we must return to a time when confidence began migrating from character to procedure. Written contracts replaced spoken word. Seals mattered more than voices. Ledgers remembered what humans forgot. Trust was no longer felt. It was recorded. The transition seemed purely technical, a matter of paperwork and process, but it represented something far more profound. The separation of belief in the individual and its relocation into systems that operated independently of any single person's judgment or integrity. The reveal came quietly, almost administratively. Clerks standardized terms. Courts enforced consistency. Obligations became transferable, enforceable, abstract. A promise no longer lived between two people. It lived inside a system. And once trust entered machinery, it began to obey mechanical rules. This transformation delivered speed. Deals multiplied. Risk dispersed. Strangers transacted effortlessly. But something subtle shifted. When trust became mechanical, belief followed process rather than judgment. If the system accepted an agreement, confidence followed. Even when intuition hesitated, London had not lost trust. It had relocated it. And relocation changed trust's nature in ways that would take decades to fully understand. Because trust that lives in systems behaves differently from trust that lives in relationships. It scales without limit, but also fails without warning. Because systems lack the intuition that once allowed individuals to sense danger before it became visible. And once trust lived inside structure instead of people, the city would have to learn what happened when the structure itself was tested. As mechanical trust spread, London's financial world gained confidence without familiarity. Transactions no longer required knowing who stood on the other side. They required only that procedures were followed. If the paperwork aligned, belief followed automatically. This shift changed behavior almost immediately. Merchants took on partners they would never have trusted personally. Lenders extended credit across vast distances. Risk was accepted not because it felt safe, but because the system said it was permissible. Trust became transferable, detached from human judgment. The advantages were undeniable. Disputes declined. Speed increased. Capital flowed with fewer interruptions. The city felt smoother, more predictable, more modern. But beneath that efficiency, a new dependency formed. Participants began trusting the process more than their own understanding. The machinery of trust became so reliable that questioning it felt not just unnecessary, but counterproductive, as if skepticism itself were a form of inefficiency to be engineered away. When questions arose, they were deferred to structure. If a contract existed, doubt was dismissed. If enforcement was guaranteed, caution softened. Responsibility blurred as trust was outsourced to systems designed to handle it. Few asked whether those systems truly reflected reality or merely repeated assumptions. Specialists thrived in this environment. Lawyers, clerks, and intermediaries who understood the machinery gained influence disproportionate to their visibility. They knew which forms mattered, which clauses shifted burden, which procedures protected whom. Trust, once social, became technical. Tension emerged when outcomes surprised participants. Losses occurred despite flawless compliance. Obligations triggered consequences no one felt accountable for. When things went wrong, blame pointed not to individuals, but to mechanisms no one fully controlled. The danger was subtle. Mechanical trust reduced friction, but also reduced skepticism. Deals moved forward because they could, not because they should. Confidence no longer paused to ask why. It asked only whether the system allowed it. London was building a world where belief followed structure automatically. And while that world moved faster than ever before, it was also becoming fragile in a way few yet recognized. Because when trust lives inside machinery, the failure of that machinery carries consequences far beyond any single promise. The fragility revealed itself when the machinery of trust encountered stress it had never been designed to absorb. A sequence of perfectly valid agreements began triggering losses across multiple parties at once. No fraud had occurred. No rules had been broken. Yet outcomes felt unjust, even absurd. Participants searched for human error and found none. Every form was correct. Every clause enforceable. Every procedure followed. Trust had functioned exactly as engineered, and that was a problem. The system had multiplied obligation without multiplying understanding. Complexity had outpaced comprehension, and the machinery continued executing commitments that no human participant would have endorsed had they been able to see the full picture. As pressure mounted, mechanical trust began behaving like momentum. Once initiated, it carried agreements forward regardless of changing conditions. Contracts executed automatically. Obligations transferred without reassessment. The system rewarded continuity, not reflection. Merchants felt trapped inside promises they no longer believed in but could not escape. Lenders watched exposure grow even as confidence shrank. Each participant assumed someone else had assessed the risk. Responsibility dissolved into process. The conflict sharpened when multiple failures aligned. Settlements cascaded. Protections overlapped imperfectly. Trust that had been distributed mechanically now converged all at once. Losses spread not through deception, but through design. Calls for reform followed. Some demanded stricter enforcement. Others argued enforcement was a problem. The city realized it had confused reliability with wisdom. A system could be consistent and still be wrong. London stood at a critical moment. Trust had been scaled, automated, and externalized. But without human judgment reintroduced, the machinery would continue executing decisions long after confidence had evaporated. The question was no longer whether trust should be mechanical. It was how much humanity it could lose before becoming dangerous. The resolution did not dismantle mechanical trust. It refined it. London recognized that systems built to scale belief required limits, moments where judgment could interrupt procedure. The city learned to slow the machinery without stopping it. Safeguards were introduced. Review points embedded. Contracts gained flexibility rather than rigidity. Enforcement was paired with discretion. Trust remained structured, but it was no longer automatic. Belief required confirmation, not just compliance. This recalibration restored balance. Participants regained agency without losing efficiency. Systems continued to support distance and scale, but they no longer replaced discernment entirely. Mechanical trust became a foundation, not a substitute for thought. London absorbed a lasting lesson. Trust cannot be fully outsourced. When belief becomes automatic, skepticism disappears. And without skepticism, systems amplify error with perfect consistency. The city moved forward wiser. It kept its machinery, but learned when to disengage it. Trust, once human, then mechanical, became hybrid, a collaboration between structure and judgment. And in that balance, London found resilience. Subscribe to join the journey. The